Hi everyone, Jack Diamond here with a special behind-the-scenes look at some of the visual effects that were used to create Jim Vaylin's Halloween Adventure Part 3. Fair warning, there are some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the adventure yet, check it out by clicking the link above. Alright, there are a number of shots to go through today, so rather than giving you an in-depth tutorial, I figured I'd give you a basic overview for how each shot was created. That way we can get through a lot more. We are going to be using After Effects, so let's get right to it. Here's the first shot.
One of the first visual effects shots, and in fact the only visual effect in the intro, is this shot where Jimmy turns around and the color drops out of the picture and he has this icy breath to indicate the presence of this demon which is actually stalking him. So this was done pretty simply, as you might imagine. Basically just the color saturation was actually done on this clip before the icy breath was actually included, as was the shot of the demon in the background, which is basically just a few shots cut in. Just the demon masked in, blurred, transparency affected, things like that. The icy breath is probably the hardest part of this whole shot, and that was done actually using a third-party plugin to After Effects called Particular by Trapcode. And there's actually a really good tutorial on how to do this icy breath on Video Copilot's website. So you can actually check that out if you're really interested. But basically, that's what I wanted to say about this, is it's a particle effect. So there are particles being emitted from Jimmy's mouth, and then they're turning into this sort of smoke. The second shot you see in the intro with the visual effect is this zoom out shot where we reveal that Jimmy's actually in hell. And as you probably guessed, this shot was accomplished by using a green screen. So I'm just going to break down for you exactly how I did this shot. So the shot of Jimmy was actually done in front of a green screen, as I mentioned. But what I didn't mention was these tracking markers that we actually put onto the set as we were shooting. That was just giving us basically the ability to go in and motion track the background. We wanted to track it for the actual zoom. Since we did the zoom in camera, we had to translate that into After Effects. So that was tracked with Mocha. And then we applied a key light effect, which basically dropped out the background and then replaced it with this sort of fire composite that I had built in a separate composition. That left, of course, the tracking markers on the screen. So those had to be masked out, as well as the sort of outside borders where the green screen didn't quite fit the entire scene we were shooting. And so that was accomplished by basically adding a bunch of masks. So once those masks were added, we ended up with what is basically a complete shot. There were actually a number of shots that we shot for the Halloween Adventure in front of the green screen this year. Notably, some of the shots at the beginning and at the end. For example, this shot, which had a basic key light effect applied to it to drop the green screen background out. Then a solid white background was actually added in, followed by an adjustment layer with a glow effect, which basically just completed the illusion that Jimmy was in some sort of glowing white environment. One of my favorite shots in the Halloween Adventure, and one that you might not even expect was a visual effects shot, was this shot where Jimmy walks away from or walks towards the cabin in the woods. This was supposed to be an isolated cabin, and we really wanted to give the illusion that this cabin was sort of in the middle of nowhere. Well, when we shot the original cabin, there were a number of elements that actually took us out of that reality. For example, there's actually an address on the side of this building here. There's some concrete blocks which are clearly man-made, part of a driveway, and there's this large telephone pole. So it was pretty easy to actually remove those. Basically, the first thing I did was took this address, and I noticed that it's sort of in a bunch of green leaves here, and then there's some red on the side. But I noticed that there's a similar pattern over here, green leaves leading to red. So I basically took a copy of these green and red leaves and just put it right over top of that. And that actually masks it quite nicely. You don't even notice anymore. I did a similar technique up here with the telephone pole, where I took kind of a piece right beside it, maybe around here somewhere, and just slid it over, and that hid the telephone pole quite nicely. Again, you'd never know that wasn't just sort of seamlessly integrated there. And then the final two were just these concrete blocks, where I basically just took pieces of the grass that were right in front and just included those right in. When Jimmy is in the living room of the cabin, one of the things he encounters is a television set that is supposed to have the vampire character on it. In order to accomplish that, we basically shot this shot of the TV on a tripod, and then separately, in Toronto, we actually shot Andrew Huang as the vampire. So in order to make these shots sort of seamlessly integrate, the first thing I did was add a TV line effect. So that's just a file that I created in Photoshop that has these lines on it to sort of give it that interlaced look. That shot was then dropped on top of the television clip, and then I applied something called a mask. So in this particular case, what I did is took a still frame of the TV into Photoshop, and I drew this mask shape, which basically knocks out the TV. Then I applied that as a Luma inverted matte to the actual clip of the vampire on there. But obviously that's not quite what we wanted because he's really zoomed in. Remember, we're looking at the full frame of the vampire here. So let me just turn off that mask for a second and we'll see some of the things I did to fix that. I wanted to, first of all, apply a corner pin effect. So that drops the TV more or less into the right shape it's supposed to be. And the next thing I did was apply this bulge effect because I know that the TV has a curved face, so I wanted to really exaggerate this, so I applied this bulge effect. Then I added the Luma inverted matte of the TV, and I basically end up with my final shot.
It is I, the vampire, coming at you through the magic of television.
Toward the end of the movie, Jimmy encounters a door in the forest, which actually represents him escaping from his own mind. So in order to accomplish this, basically, we took a photograph of a door, and then we motion tracked it into the shot. Obviously, there were a little bit of difficulties here, particularly when Jimmy moves his hand in front of the door, so that had to be masked individually. So I just want to show you really quick how I built the door, first of all. So the door started out in life just as a single photograph, and then I decided to add a couple elements to make it look a little bit better. So the first thing I did was duplicated the door, moved it back in space a little bit, and then darkened it a tiny bit, and that added a sort of 3D effect to the door. And then just to sort of further sell that, I created a third copy of the door, made it dark, scaled it right down, and blurred it to become the sort of shadow at the base of the door. The shot itself was tracked using Mocha, where I basically tracked the forest floor and then parented the door to the forest floor null that was tracked in. Once the door was tracked into place, it looked pretty good. Unfortunately, as Jimmy moved his hand around in front to point at the door, well, we see an immediate problem there. So that was solved by basically creating a new layer with his hand on it and creating a whole series of masks to actually isolate his fingers and his hand and really sell the illusion that his hand is in front of the door. And if you actually see frame by frame, this actually took quite a bit of effort actually rotoscoping this out. I probably could have used the roto brush to do this and saved myself a little bit of time, but I'm sort of old school when it comes to this sort of thing, and the first thing I think of is usually just grabbing the mask tool and adding masks. So that's the way I chose to do it. I knew it was only going to be about 10 frames, so it only took me about maybe 20 minutes of work to actually go through and mask out every single frame for his hand. The final visual effect in Jim Vaylin's Halloween Adventure 3 comes just after Jimmy goes through the door and we flash to this hell environment once again, where Damien and Ripper are still trying to possess Jimmy. And this is the first time we really get to see Ripper in all his glory as well. And you might recognize that face. Anyway, what you might not realize about this shot is that each element was actually shot separately so that they could be composited in a completely different way. For example, I can turn off each of the character layers. So there's Damien and there's Ripper. We shot these guys separately on a green screen and then composited them in. One of the things this allowed us to do was actually scale up the layer that Ripper was on to give the impression that he's a much larger character than is possible when he's shot in the same shot as Damien. Additionally, some black smoke elements were composited over and behind Ripper to really sell this sort of demon effect.
I hope you enjoyed this special behind-the-scenes look at some of the visual effects of Jim Vaylin's Halloween Adventure 3. Just a reminder, Jim Vaylin has created a Halloween adventure every year for the last 3 years. You can check those out right here. Each one of them represents about an hour of online play, so you're in for a lot of fun. Just so you know, there is an overall story as well, so you should probably start at the beginning. Plus, you might see some cameos from some pretty popular YouTubers. If you want to see more behind-the-scenes videos and tutorials, you can check out my channel by subscribing. You can also follow me on Twitter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.